Welcome back to Project Aviate. Today we're diving into one of the most controversial chapters in modern aviation, the story of the Boeing 737 MAX. To understand why this aircraft became such a lightning rod for debate, scrutiny, and global headlines, we first have to go back to the very beginning of Boeing's legendary narrow-body jet. The Boeing 737 has been the workhorse of the skies since the 1960s, a jet that revolutionized air travel by giving airlines a reliable, efficient, and versatile aircraft for short and medium routes. Picture the early 737 classics rolling down the runway with their stubby fuselages and smaller engines, carrying passengers during the golden age of aviation. For decades, the 737 evolved through the 200, 300, 500, and next generation series, each iteration more advanced but still retaining that recognizable 737 profile. Now fast forward to the modern era, where competition between Boeing and Airbus was fiercer than ever. When Airbus launched the A320neo with highly efficient new engines, airlines rushed to place orders threatening Boeing's dominance. Boeing needed a fast answer, but instead of designing a brand new aircraft, they chose to modify the existing 737 once again, leading to the birth of the 737 MAX. The new model featured larger, more fuel-efficient CFM engines, distinctive split-tip winglets, and updated avionics. From the outside, the MAX looked sleek and modern, but under the surface it carried design compromises that would later prove critical. Images of these powerful engines highlight just how large they were compared to earlier designs, mounted higher and further forward on the wing to maintain ground clearance. This seemingly small change had big consequences. Inside the cockpit, pilots were greeted with a familiar layout, resembling the 737NG, but behind the scenes Boeing had quietly added new software. Known as the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS, this system was designed to counteract the aerodynamic effects of those larger engines, which could cause the nose to pitch up at certain angles. Boeing intended MCAS to work automatically, without requiring pilots to learn much about it. On paper, this made the 737 MAX attractive to airlines since pilots transitioning from older 737s would not need expensive retraining. But in reality, it meant many pilots didn't fully understand how MCAS worked or even that it existed. As airlines introduced the MAX into service, the aircraft initially seemed like a success story, filling order books with thousands of sales. But behind that success, cracks were forming. Imagine an aircraft flying smoothly through the clouds when suddenly an unseen system begins to push the nose downward. MCAS relied on data from a single angle of attack sensor, and if that sensor malfunctioned, the system could repeatedly push the aircraft into a dangerous dive. This vulnerability would tragically come to light in late 2018. Lion Air Flight 610, a brand new 737 MAX 8, took off from Jakarta. Shortly after takeoff, the aircraft began to experience erratic sensor readings. MCAS repeatedly forced the nose downward, and the pilots struggled to fight against the system. Despite their efforts, the plane ultimately entered a steep dive into the Java Sea, killing all 189 people on board. Wreckage scattered across the water became the first clue to what was happening. Investigators began piecing together the mystery, but the tragedy was only the beginning. Just 5 months later, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 departed Addis Ababa. Almost immediately after takeoff, the aircraft began exhibiting the same terrifying nose-down tendencies. Once again, MCAS activated based on faulty sensor data. The pilots fought desperately, but the system overwhelmed their controls and the plane crashed, killing all 157 people on board. 2 crashes in less than half a year was unprecedented for a modern jetliner. Aviation authorities and the public demanded answers. For Boeing and regulators like the FAA, this was a turning point. The FAA's role in certifying the MAX came under intense scrutiny. How could such a critical system, with so little redundancy, have been approved? Investigations revealed a troubling relationship between Boeing and regulators, with accusations that Boeing had too much influence over the certification process. Images of FAA offices stacked with documents symbolized the controversy over oversight and accountability. The world's airlines and governments quickly grounded the 737 MAX. Across deserts and airports, rows upon rows of MAX aircraft sat idle, grounded indefinitely. For passengers, these images became symbols of mistrust, raising doubts about Boeing's priorities had speed to market overtaken safety. The media spotlight only intensified the pressure. Headlines worldwide carried phrases like 737 MAX crisis, Boeing under fire, and trust broken. Lawsuits, congressional hearings, and emotional testimony from families of crash victims painted a damning picture of corporate failure and regulatory weakness. At the heart of it all, the reputation of Boeing, the builder of iconic aircraft like the 707, 747 and 777 was under attack. What had once been a symbol of innovation and safety now faced accusations of negligence and profit-driven decision-making. As months turned into years, Boeing worked feverishly to redesign MCAS. They added safeguards, multiple sensor inputs, and new pilot training requirements. Engineers tested the modifications in simulators and test flights, aiming to restore confidence. Eventually, regulators across the globe began lifting the grounding, allowing the MAX to return to service. Airlines slowly brought the aircraft back into passenger operations, often accompanied by public relations campaigns emphasizing safety and transparency. Passengers boarding the MAX again were stepping into not just an airplane, but into the center of one of aviation's greatest lessons in accountability. The story of the 737 MAX isn't just about technology, it's about trust. It highlights the fine balance between innovation, corporate competition, and the responsibility to protect human lives. The sight of grounded fleets, grieving families, and international headlines remind us that aviation safety is never something to take for granted. Yet, as sunset images of the MAX returning to flight suggest, this aircraft is also a story of recovery, resilience, and lessons learned. Today, the MAX continues to fly with airlines worldwide, carrying millions of passengers safely, but its legacy will always carry the weight of its troubled beginning. So why did the Boeing 737 MAX become so controversial? It was a perfect storm of rushed development, design compromises, insufficient training, regulatory failures, and the unthinkable cost of two tragic crashes. The controversy lives on as a reminder that in aviation every decision matters. From the placement of an engine to the coding of a software system, the smallest detail can have the largest consequence. The MAX's story is still being written, but its early chapters have already changed the way we view aircraft certification and corporate accountability forever. And that wraps up today's journey. If you enjoyed this deep dive into aviation's most controversial aircraft, make sure to subscribe to Project Aviate for more stories of the skies.